The Force moved around Obi-Wan like a stream over rocks, bubbling, swirling, and then smoothing out like a glittering mirror. For the last few months, he'd been so busy that he had not had any opportunity to just sit and sink into a meditation like he'd done before the war. There were a lot of things that he did before the war that he could no longer do, but this one felt like the most egregious affront to his Jedi senses. Meditation was essential to maintaining equilibrium, and Obi-Wan felt like he was mentally and spiritually in the process of sliding off a cliff. Falling further into the meditation, he began to sense the brightly shining lights that were his battalion in the Force. They burned like little protostars in the nebular creche of space, all but one who shone far more brightly than the others. He could feel the sparking sunburst that was Commander Cody on the bridge, his Force presence placid and calm as he went about the ship's business. Obi-Wan was not sure if Cody himself knew, but Obi-Wan sensed that, had Cody not been born a clone on Kamino, he would have had a home in the temple. The commander was most definitely Force-sensitive, but Obi-Wan had yet to figure out how to broach the topic, or if Commander Cody even cared to know about it besides. Sighing, Obi-Wan released that train of thought and the accompanying tinge of regret into the Force, and continued with his mediation. As he did, he could feel the Force tugging at him, urging his thoughts and senses towards something else. Something new, different and unplanned, yet also something he had been thinking about since Anakin's knighting ceremony. Should he or should he not take on another Padawan? He had submitted the request to the Council at the direction of the Force, and then immediately after had the odd sensation that the request was not for him at all, which seemed to make no sense considering the Force was also urging him to take on a new student. He gave a moment of consideration to that student being Cody, but the immediate and loud sense of no from the Force put the brakes on that plan. Cody, it seemed, was not destined to become a Jedi. Obi-Wan supposed he could live with that, though part of him mourned the waste of good talent. Not a waste, the Force whispered, just a differing purpose. Obi-Wan acknowledged that thought and let it pass into the Force, centering himself on the idea of a new Padawan. He focused even more, letting himself sink further into the Force than he had dared since the Battle of Geonosis. Settling like a leaf on the river of the Force, Obi-Wan floated and meandered through its waters, barely focusing on the flickering images and words that passed before his mind's eye. Qui-Gon had always discouraged his use of the unifying Force, but now it was all Obi-Wan could feel, that prescient ache that told him something was coming, that he was being led down a path. Lately, that had always brought a feeling of dread, but this was filled with light and happiness. The feeling was so rare that Obi-Wan homed in on it like a bird of prey, circling the thought and looking for an opening to dive down into it. All at once, that opening presented itself, and Obi-Wan pounced, grasping it with all the mental strength he possessed. The Force snapped him up, submerging him in its currents, and Obi-Wan found himself unceremoniously dropped into the middle of a vision, something that had not happened to him for many, many years. Eyes blinking open, he found himself standing in a completely white hallway, walls straight and ceiling slightly rounded. It was unmistakably Tipoca City on Kamino. The hall seemed oddly taller than the last time he had visited. Obi-Wan looked down at his feet and saw them clad in black boots, his legs in the red pants of the clone cadets with the blue jumper over his chest. Just as that thought occurred, a small squad of them marched around the hall, an older clone in solid red in the lead. Obi-Wan felt himself stop and dart to the wall, pressing against it and hiding in the alcove provided by a convenient doorway. He had the sense he was not supposed to be wherever in the city he currently was. Thoughts that were not his own began to bubble up, along with a crushing panic that raced his heart and made his blood pound in his ears. Not supposed to be out? Can't let them catch me, don't want to die, gotta run, don't know where to, but I gotta run. The small clone squad passed through the T-junction without seeing him, but the panic did not abate. It bled out into the Force, red-hot and all-consuming. Obi-Wan felt the vision slipping and desperately tried to hold on to it. No, wait. I need to see. Gasping, Obi-Wan's eyes snapped open to the view of his quarters on the Negotiator, the grey durasteel of the walls clashing with the after-image of Kamino's blindingly white hallways on the backs of his eyelids. Chest heaving and breaths coming too quickly, Obi-Wan's hands fisted in the fabric of his pants over the knees. His palms were damp. He could feel a bead of sweat rolling down the small of his back, the Force spiking and agitated around him. Slowly, he let the panic go into the Force and stood, feeling more in control of himself. "Well," he said to the empty room, "it's a good job we're on our way to Kamino then, isn't it?" Interrupting his thoughts, the door to his quarters chimed, and Obi-Wan nearly jumped, not having sensed anyone approaching. He frowned at the door, then his lips tipped slightly upwards. Cody was on the other side. "It's open, Commander," Obi-Wan called as he made his way over to the small desk nestled in the corner of the room across from his bunk. The door swooshed open with its characteristic hiss of air, and Commander Cody stepped through, armor gleaming and his bucket tucked under his left arm. "Sir, I brought those requisition forms you were asking for." He held up a handful of datapads and gestured towards Obi-Wan's desk. "I thought we could go over them, make sure the 212th is properly restocked." Obi-Wan smiled and gestured towards the extra chair he kept in his rooms exactly for this purpose. He took the one in the center of the desk and got comfortable. "Of course, Commander, please have a seat." Cody sat. He laid the pads out on the small table and leaned over them, not quite into Obi-Wan's space, but close enough. "The first two are for more LAATs and ammunition, which I've already filled out. Just need your signature on those. This last one here is a requisition for more troopers, sir. That one I wanted to talk to you about. Not sure how you wanted to restructure the platoons, if you did at all, General." Obi-Wan placed his finger on the first two pads, signing off on the equipment without even blinking, then picked up the last one. As he began to read, his brows drew together and his lips thinned, his grip on the pad growing a little more taut. His disquiet bled out into the Force, and from the corner of his eye he saw Cody squash a wince and then tense, clearly sensing Obi-Wan's emotions, but not knowing how to interpret them. His commander was becoming more and more in tune with Obi-Wan's emotions as time went on, it seemed. No one else elicited a response from him. Obi-Wan drew in a short breath and tried to release his growing anger into the Force to keep from upsetting his commander. "Cody, this form is the same one as the other two, a requisition for equipment and supplies." Yes, sir," Cody said hesitantly, relaxing a fraction when Obi-Wan stopped bleeding indignation out like a physical thing. His confusion seemed to take over at that point. Obi-Wan sighed, his shoulders drooping as he rubbed his free hand over his beard. "Sometimes I truly despise this. General?" "Commander," Obi-Wan said, letting the pad drop back to the desk and locking eyes with Cody. "I was not taught in the temple that living beings are things, equivalent to a blaster rifle or a crate of ammunition. It troubles me to see you and the rest of the troopers treated this way. I don't like it." The commander sighed, the tension leaking out of him completely at that. "I know that, General, but it is what it is, sir." "Yes, well, it shouldn't be," Obi-Wan replied. He shook his head and looked back at the form. "Regardless, I don't want to change much of the structure of the 212th, simply fill in the gaps created from our most recent skirmish." He began to scroll through the data, eyes flicking back and forth as he read. "Which it seems you have done with your usual efficiency, Commander Cody." He felt Cody's small glow of pride in the Force before it was subsumed under his usual placid calm. "Thank you, sir." He took back the datapad after Obi-Wan signed it and went to stand, then paused on the edge of the chair, giving Obi-Wan an appraising look. "Is there something else, General?" Obi-Wan blinked, startled, and cocked his head, looking over at Cody consideringly. Force-sensitive indeed, Obi-Wan thought. Perhaps, Commander, perhaps." He settled further back into his chair, crossing his right leg over his knee and folding his arms, left hand smoothing over the edges of his beard. He felt the Force urging him to speak, so he did. "I was meditating right before you came in, and the Force showed me something, well, odd." "Odd, sir?" Cody relaxed back into his chair as well, setting his bucket on the table, the visor staring blankly back at Obi-Wan. "I don't know much about the Force, but I'll try to help you if I can, General." Obi-Wan smiled and dropped his hand from his face, settling it in his lap. "I had a rather strange vision. I believe I told you I wanted a new Padawan, correct?" Cody's brow furrowed at the non-sequitur, but he answered anyway, "Yes, sir. I've been going over plans for it with Ghost Company." "Right. Well, I was meditating about that when I had the vision. I've already put in the request to the council, but for some reason I don't think the Padawan that comes from it will be mine." Obi-Wan sighed, folding his arms across his chest, missing his billowing sleeves that were contained in the vambraces he wore. "The Force gave me a vision of Kamino." "Kamino?" Cody's voice pitched up, startled, and his eyebrows tried to climb to his regulation hairline. "Yes, quite strange, don't you think?" Obi-Wan gestured with his right hand in the air, fingers waving slightly. "I was in a hallway in Topeka City. I could tell I was a cadet. Everything was much taller than I was. And I saw another squad of cadets march by. Whoever I was seeing was panicking, like they were in danger. They were hiding, trying desperately not to be seen." "That doesn't sound good, General," Cody said after a moment, his surprise giving way to concern. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Did you see anything else? Anything at all that could give you a clue as to what was going on?" "No, unfortunately not," Obi-Wan sighed. Then he brightened, an odd look of mischief in his eyes. "However, I got the sense that whoever they were to be my next Padawan." Obi-Wan could practically see Cody's mind halt and reboot on that thought, the commander's surprise radiating out into the Force like a shockwave. "I'm sorry, what?" He shook his head. "You can't be serious, sir. Us clones don't have the Force. We can't become Jedi." "Commander," Obi-Wan said, mirroring his posture and leaning forward, elbows on his knees, "I want you to understand something important about the Force. And that is, the Force chooses its champions, Cody. They can come from anywhere and be anyone the Force wishes. It's not bound by genetics or destiny or worth. If the Force chose a clone, then the Force chose a clone. It's not up to us to decide who is and who isn't worthy of becoming a Jedi. Only the Force could make that claim." Obi-Wan paused, looking his commander in the eye. "Do you understand?" Cody swallowed, clearly unsettled by this revelation and trying desperately not to show it. "Yes, sir, I understand." He leaned back, escaping from the oddly intimate moment, crossing his arms over his plastoid-armored chest. "But General, if it is a Force-sensitive clone on Kamino, then we need to move quickly." Obi-Wan's eyes narrowed, and he felt a sense of dread pool in his gut. "Why do I think I'm going to like what you're about to say even less than that requisition form?" Cody sighed, resignation in every line of his being. "Because the Kaminoans don't like defects or differences in the clones, sir." He took a deep breath and seemed to steel himself against what he was about to say, his Force presence shrinking and tightening around him like a spiky shield. "They tend to decommission the ones that deviate too far from the template. If they found out about this cadet, that would explain what you saw." Obi-Wan felt that he simultaneously both had a revelation and a swirling hot miasma of rage pounding through his blood. Cody's Force presence tightened down further, the commander himself attempting to shrink away, and Obi-Wan forced away the white-hot righteous fury that flooded through him like a raging river. Cody relaxed a fraction, but not all the way. Obi-Wan had noticed, as they worked together more and more, that Cody was becoming attuned to his moods and emotions, no matter how tightly Obi-Wan tried to shield them. Obi-Wan took a breath, counted to 3 and let it out, repeating the process twice before speaking. "Cody, should I assume that means what I think it does?" "Yes, sir." Obi-Wan grit his teeth and tried to maintain his calm, if not for his own sake, then for his commander. "I see. Well, I'll be having a discussion with Master Tai and Lama Su as well when we get there, it seems. I will not, under any circumstances, allow such a thing to continue." Cody smiled, the tension in his shoulders not quite gone, but they weren't trying to climb up to his ears any longer. "I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that one, sir." "You may yet get your wish, Cody," Obi-Wan said, mirroring his smile. "I will need your help in finding this cadet and having him removed from training and stationed here on the Negotiator." Cody's lips twisted in a wry smirk, a pleased light in his eyes. "Oh, is that all, General?" Obi-Wan grinned. "Yes, that's all." The Negotiator settled into orbit around Kamino the next day, and Obi-Wan found himself on board an LAAT with Cody, Boyle, Waxer, and Helix, bound for the landing pad in Tipoca City. An entire squad of landing craft were following down with them, though the others were empty, save for the pilots required to fly them. They would be used to bring their fresh, shiny troops up to the ship. Obi-Wan had met and plotted with Cody well into the night, going over every scrap of information he remembered from his vision, as well as trying to find an administrative reason to remove the cadet that would both protect him from repercussions from the Grand Army of the Republic and allow him to be near Obi-Wan simultaneously. What they found might work, but it was tenuous. It turned out that, as General of the 3rd Systems Army and the 7th Sky Corps, Obi-Wan was entitled to a yeoman as an administrative assistant. He'd not taken advantage of it previously, but it was there in writing that he most certainly could. Quite frankly, he hadn't, because he did not want to burden some poor, unsuspecting life form with his incomprehensible filing system or his astonishing workload. Amazingly, the regulation stated the only requirements for the position be that they were in good standing with the Grand Army of the Republic, a member of said Republic, and that they had some administrative training. Per the regulation, it could have been a hired civilian contractor, another officer, a droid, or frankly, whoever Obi-Wan wished. He hoped that loophole would allow him to snap up that poor cadet and pluck him out of the danger he was in. Cody assured him that, at the point the cadet likely was in training, he'd at least been given the basics of how to file the paperwork required for a rank-and-file trooper, which would be enough justification to work from, they hoped. It was certainly better than just outright kidnapping the poor child or leaning entirely on Jedi tradition, but Obi-Wan was not above doing so, should the need arise. The Force was cautioning against such an action, whispering in his ear that he ought to do this with as much ammunition on his side as possible, the events surrounding Anakin's introduction to the Jedi rattling around in his head. Anakin was almost denied entry, and would have been had Qui-Gon not died on Naboo. Obi-Wan did not want such a traumatic experience to befall his new apprentice, and he also wanted to be able to get his way, even if the Council told him no or the Kaminoans attempted to protest. So they had enlisted Waxer, Boyle, and Helix to help them search the city for the cadet, telling them that he was to be decommissioned for a deviation, as Obi-Wan was reluctant to explain everything until the acquisition of the cadet was final and irrevocable. The 3 troopers were happy to assist. Waxer would oversee the acquisition of new troops while keeping an eye out for potential stowaways, and Boyle would go through the training areas and records, while Helix, as the 212th Chief Medical Officer, would search through the medical files and attempt to find the cadet that way. Obi-Wan and Cody planned to speak with Shaak-Ti and Lama Su directly about the practice decommissioning, while hopefully pinning down Master T later to see if she could sense the clone they were looking for. Obi-Wan had tried to meditate and find the vision again, but he had been entirely unsuccessful, much to his chagrin. All they had to rely on was what Obi-Wan had seen, which frankly wasn't much. All he could tell was what part of the city he had been in, and what barracks it was near, so that had narrowed down the number of squads they had to search. It still left quite a lot of data to sift through, but it was better than combing the entire city, which would take weeks if not longer. Weeks they did not have as they were needed on Christophsis, following this pit stop on Kamino as soon as reasonably possible, as they had the sensitive cargo of the cloaking ship to deliver. The LAAT landed with its customary jerk, and the bay doors slid open, letting in the foggy, humid climate of Kamino. Amazingly, it wasn't raining, and faint rays of sunlight could be seen through the small gaps in the planet's constant cloud cover. Obi-Wan stepped out onto the platform, Cody, Boyle, and Helix following him while Waxer peeled off to meet with the sergeant that was overseeing the transfer of new troops. They came up to the entrance of the city, and Obi-Wan paused at the door, squaring his shoulders and taking in a fortifying breath. He craned his head over his shoulders to eye his troops behind him. "Ready, gentlemen?" Cody nodded, his Force presence feeling grim yet calm under his helmet. "Yes, sir." Obi-Wan nodded back and turned, palming open the door and stepping through. The hallway they landed in was pure white, like every other room in the main city of Tipoca. When Obi-Wan had first arrived on the planet during his hunt for Jango Fett, he hadn't known that the Kaminoans saw in the ultraviolet spectrum, and while everything appeared a stark clinical white to human eyes, it was not so to its native inhabitants. He'd learned many things since that fateful chase, not the least of which was how different, yet how similar, Fett's clones were to Fett himself. They all had that same Mandalorian ferocity in battle, but not the boiling hatred that had oozed from Fett like ichor. The clones were much more pleasant, and leagues more cheerful in both demeanor and outlook than Fett had ever been. Even Cody, who tended towards a more taciturn countenance than the others. Winding white hallways led them to the main meeting room, Boyle and Helix each going their separate ways at the appropriate junction with a small hand signal and a nod. They'd been instructed to check in with comm beeps every half hour, should what they were doing take that much time or longer. Even though they were in friendly space, on a friendly planet, and picking up new allies, Obi-Wan still felt like something was stalking and hunting him through the halls, a prickling sensation that wound its way up the back of his neck. He could tell by the set of Cody's shoulders and the deliberate pace of his stride that his commander felt it too. A tense and silent walk later, they appeared at the meeting room Master T had chosen. Obi-Wan raised his hand to key the door, but paused, turning to face Cody, who was standing a few paces behind to his right. "You don't have to be here for this meeting if you don't want, Commander. It's likely to get uncomfortable." Cody nodded, his bucket bobbing up and down. "I know that, General, but I think I need to be there." Obi-Wan shrugged. "Well, as long as you're sure." With that, he opened the door and stepped in. Master T was standing off to the right of Lama Su, who was seated at his desk. Both of them had looked up expectantly when the door hissed open and Obi-Wan and Cody stepped into the room. It was white, like everything else, with those odd raindrop-shaped chairs that hung from the ceiling. The door hissed closed, and for a moment no one moved, not at all eager to sit down. Shakti's lips tipped up in a slight smirk as she locked eyes with Obi-Wan, clearly knowing that her fellow council member was up to something. Obi-Wan resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "Master Kenobi, please do come in." Lama Su was the first to break the tense silence in the room. He gestured to the chairs in the expansive and graceful manner of his species. "Please sit." "I'm all right, thank you, Prime Minister. I can't stay long. We're on an unfortunately tight schedule," Obi-Wan answered, coming further into the room and putting his hands in the sleeves of his brown outer robe. It wasn't as comfortable over his shoulder pauldrons, vambraces, and the small chest plate, but it was better than not having it at all. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Of course," Lama Su replied, "though I confess I am not sure why you wish to do so. I wanted to speak with you regarding the practice of decommissioning the troopers," Obi-Wan stated, deciding that drawing it out would not do anyone any favors. "It is as it was from Master T's arrival, Master Jedi," Lama Su replied. His tone, though the slow-flowing speech pattern of the Kaminoans, was still tense. "We no longer do that." "Right, of course," Obi-Wan replied, flashing his most genial smile. "I just wanted to make sure. I had heard a rumor and wished to clarify. I'm glad all is as it should be." "It is, Obi-Wan," Shakti replied. The cunning in her eyes belied her easy manner. She moved across the room to stand in front of Kenobi. She locked eyes with him and her Force presence seemed to press into him. "But thank you for the information. I will continue to be vigilant." Her smile became fuller, more genuine. "But tell me, what else do you need while you are here?" Obi-Wan felt the Force give him a nudge to respond, like a child poking his shoulder. "Trust her," it whispered. "I was hoping you would speak with me regarding the new squads the 212th is picking up today. I'd like some insider information, if you have it." "Of course," she agreed, and walked a few paces back to Lama Su. She inclined her head slightly, in a bow. "Thank you for your indulgence, Prime Minister. I understand. This is a delicate subject." "I am always available to the Jedi," he replied, with a graceful hand gesture. "Though I wonder about these rumors that brought you to my office, Master Kenobi. As I said, we do not decommission faulty product any longer, as per your council's request." Obi-Wan felt Cody's indignation at being referred to as a product sharply and held in his own sympathetic wince. "It must have been old news that got chewed up in the ship's gossip chain, Your Excellency," Obi-Wan replied with deliberate ease and another disarming smile. He could feel Cody's Force presence close in and become that spiky, pokey thing it was in his quarters last night. From the corner of his eye, he saw Master T's gaze, drawn to his commander in consideration. You know how those tend to grow minds of their own on ships as large as the Negotiator. It is a rather unfortunate reality of shipboard life, Lama Su said agreeably. Well, do not worry, nothing has changed here on Kamino in the interim. That is reassuring to hear. Thank you for your time, Prime Minister. Obi-Wan bowed. He turned his attention to Master T. If you would be so kind as to accompany me and regale me with the tales of the squads we are getting, Master, I would appreciate it. Master Shakti smiled, bid Lama Su farewell and agreed, following Obi-Wan and Cody from the office. When the door slid closed with a hiss, she turned to them both, a slight frown marring her features. Tell me, Obi-Wan, what has truly brought you here? The spikes in Cody's Force signature flared, jabbing into Obi-Wan's own and causing him to stifle a wince. Outwardly, Cody hadn't so much as twitched, but in the Force he was clearly showing his defensive anxiety. It drew Shakti's calculating gaze to him again, prompting Obi-Wan to press out with his own feelings and attempt to shield his commander from her inspection. It would not do to upset Cody this early into the conversation, nor to give the poor man away. I had a vision, if you'll believe it, Obi-Wan answered candidly, hoping to draw the attention back to himself. A vision? Shakti asked as they began to walk down the hallway, Cody trailing a few paces behind, head swiveling back and forth as he scanned the hallway for threats. A vision of what? A cadet in trouble, Obi-Wan replied with a grimace. Master T's attention was fully on him now, concern lining her face. I don't know if it has already happened or if it is about to happen, but I would like to find him. Of course, she answered readily. Do you know who it was? No, only that they were having a panic attack about being decommissioned in the hallway and attempting to run. Obi-Wan spied an empty open room, grabbed lightly at Shakti's elbow and dragged her inside. He signaled hurriedly to Cody to guard the door and closed it, not waiting for an acknowledgement. Obi-Wan, what? I need you to swear you'll keep this from the Kaminoans, Shuk, Obi-Wan said, in lieu of an explanation of his actions. So long as it doesn't endanger anyone, of course, she answered carefully. This cadet I'm trying to find is Force-sensitive. Obi-Wan waited a beat for that information to sink in, and when she didn't seem at all surprised, he continued, Do you know which one that might be? Other than your commander, you mean, she said with a teasing lilt to her voice. Obi-Wan rolled his eyes. Yes, other than Cody, who is also not a cadet. She laughed. Yes, I had noticed that. The laughter faded from her eyes and voice. I do know, and I've had a sense for some days now that something might not be right, that his future was in danger. When you landed, that feeling went away. Why is that, I wonder? I believe he is to be my new Padawan, Obi-Wan answered, marshalling his courage and deciding on honesty in this moment. Ah, she said, her grin returning, but didn't you request one from the council just last week? I did, yes, Obi-Wan said wryly and shrugged. But that was before I realized exactly what form my new student would take. However, I do not believe that request will be in vain nor go unfulfilled. I just don't believe it will be for me. I agree, she said after a moment's contemplation. Master T squared her shoulders. Now, the cadet I believe you are here for is CT-9212. Perfect, Obi-Wan replied. Now, where is he? Master T moved around him and opened the door, stepping out into the hallway. Let me show you. Commander, Master Kenobi, if you'll follow me. Did you find him, General? Cody asked as they began to walk at a clip down the hall. His voice was distorted from the vocoder, but Obi-Wan could still hear the eagerness and concern in it. I believe so, yes, he answered. He smiled. His number is CT-9212. Oh, shuck, how old is he and does he have a name? 6 standard, and I do not believe he has a name. Or if he does, he has not shared it, she answered as she led them through the maze of hallways that was Tipaca City. So he'll just barely have started unit combat training then, Cody said. His Force presence flared in concern. He's about 12 or so in Nat-born years, General. This may be a hard sell. Hard sell, Master T said, voice deceptively light. The Force is cautioning me against telling the Kaminoans the truth, Obi-Wan answered. The plan was to take him as my yeoman and tie him to the ship and myself via GAR regulations. If he was slated for decommission as your vision showed you, then that will be easier to do than you think, she answered, voice tight with indignation that such a thing was even a possibility. Even though we have expressly forbidden the Kaminoans from doing this horrid thing, I have had my suspicions that it still occasionally takes place. She sighed, letting her anger go into the Force. But if he has failed out of his instruction, we can say we will give him this opportunity as a path to redemption. They will question it, but they cannot stop us. I have full authority to assign cadets where I please. I agree, General T, Cody said before Obi-Wan could respond. The same thing happened to 99. It was a fight, but between the Alphas, the Nulls, and Skirata, we got him into maintenance. Well, this might just work in our favor, Obi-Wan said after a moment. But in light of this, I think we need to put even more scrutiny on the training processes here. They shouldn't be able to subvert our wishes. Yes, I will make sure it does not happen again. Her vow was felt in the Force like a physical thing. Even Cody relaxed as she spoke. They passed through another series of hallways and clear tubes over the water until they came to a large circular room. There were soft mats on the floor and rows of different close combat weapons in racks on the walls. 3 squads of cadets were on the mats practicing hand-to-hand combat, and all of them had 5 members, save one. Obi-Wan felt Cody's spike of concern, as the martial commander was the first to notice it. Obi-Wan sighed. Of course it would not be so simple. He's not here, sir, Cody said, irritation coloring his tone. He flagged down the ranking officer, an ARC trooper that was pacing the room, giving verbal and physical correction to the cadets. Commander Colt, said. Commander rolled his eyes and hurried over, clearly annoyed at the interruption. What can I do for you, Cody? He nodded to Shah-T and Obi-Wan. Generals. We're looking for a cadet, CT-9212, Cody said without preamble. Where is he? Commander Colt sighed, his shoulders sagging and his expression going pinched. He was supposed to be here for an eval today. He's not doing well in training. I've been trying to catch him up with his batchmates, but that hasn't been working out in the way I'd hoped. Obi-Wan felt that familiar sense of dread settle in his stomach, like an expired field ration. Do you know where he might have gone? He was called into medical today but didn't show, Colt said, tone and expression carefully neutral. He was clearly wary of the 3 of them. Vod, we need to find him. Now. The vocoder on Cody's helmet gave a staticky wobble that meant he was nearly growling out his words. He's in trouble. Yes, I know, Colt hissed, leaning in, eyes slightly wild. And there was Kark all I could do about it. I tried. Where would he go to hide? Shark interrupted, voice gentle and eyes imploring. Commander Colt seemed to deflate in the face of her compassion and the question itself. I don't know the kid well enough. He hooked his thumb over his shoulder towards the cadets doing katas on the mats, but one of them might. Commander, Obi-Wan started, turning to face Cody. You go speak with them. I will try to get a hold of Boyle, Waxer, and Helix, and let them know to be on the lookout. I doubt the cadets will talk to either Master T or myself. Probably not, sir. Cody agreed bluntly. He took his bucket off and tucked it under his left arm in a well-practiced motion. His expression was grim, but fire blazed behind his amber eyes. We'll find him, General. Of that I have no doubt. Obi-Wan nodded and shifted his gaze to Commander Colt. Commander Colt, does CT-9212 have a unique hairstyle, tattoo, or clothing? Just his hair, sir. It's unusually straight and fluffy for a clone. He keeps it short, but longer on top and spiky in the front. And he's got an odd bit of hair behind his right ear. Not quite a regulation cut. His eyes are the same color as Cody's, General. That weird orange amber we get sometimes. Cody rolled, said eyes. My eyes aren't weird, Colt. They are, and you know it, came Colt's immediate response. This was clearly a well-worn argument between the two. Simon, I'll introduce you. The 2 commanders wandered off towards the group of 4 cadets, Master T watching them go, gaze sweeping around the room. Obi-Wan keyed up his comm, hoping to get Waxer first. Thankfully, his lieutenant picked up quickly, his voice ringing clearly from the comm unit on Obi-Wan's wrist. Yes, General. Lieutenant, I have an update on our situation for you. Yes, sir? Obi-Wan heard footsteps through the comm as Waxer walked away, attempting to find a more private place to speak. Our little friend is not where he's supposed to be. I think he might be planning an escape. He might come your way, or maybe has passed some of our new recruits in the halls. See if you can get any information. But discreetly. His number is CT9212, but I do not know his name. Copy that, sir. There was a pause, a slight intake of breath. General, is he still? They haven't gotten him yet, Waxer? A relieved sigh transmitted clearly over the line. Good. I'll try and see if I can overhear anything, General. Waxer out. Not waiting for response from his fellow Jedi, Obi-Wan input the next comm code, this one belonging to Helix. The medic did not pick up, but cancelled the call and sent back 3 beeps, indicating he could not answer, but he was fine. Shelving that line of questioning, Obi-Wan pinged his last partner in crime, Boyle. The comm picked up, but there was the sound of fumbling and something brushing across the microphone before a whispered hiss came across the line. General, I'm not in the best place to answer this right now. Sorry, sir. It's fine, Boyle, Obi-Wan answered back swiftly. I just have a CT number for you to help narrow things down. What is it, sir? CT9212. Copy, sir. I'll search for that one, see what I can dig up. Thank you, Boyle. Obi-Wan cut the connection and looked over at Master T. She was eyeing him carefully, eyes keen, and expression hawkish. Well, my men will let us know if they get anything. I'm sure, she replied after a moment. She looked over at Cody and Colt, both of whom were in deep conversation with the 4 cadets of CT9212's squad. I don't think they are getting anything useful. No, I am sensing a lot of hostility in the Force, Obi-Wan said with a resigned sigh. I can't tell if it's for the commanders or for our poor cadet. The cadet, Shakti answered softly, regret colouring her tone. That is how he came to my notice. He is not well liked by his age-mates. He struggles and brings down his squad scores because of it. Struggles? Obi-Wan asked, watching as Cody began to gesture emphatically in the air at the cadets. Struggles how? He loses focus frequently, Master T answered, her voice and manner Jedi serene. He will start an exercise centered. Then, as it progresses, he begins to flounder. I have seen him stare off into the distance as the training droids shoot at him. It sounds like he's being drawn into the living force, Obi-Wan said after a moment of contemplation, unable to shield against the stimuli and unable to filter out the extraneous information and use what's left. That is what I have concluded, yes, she agreed. I had just barely come to that inference this morning, before your arrival. Despite the fact that he is untrained, he is like your commander. He hides himself well, and the only reason I could sense him is my familiarity with the clones as a whole. He stands out for his difference, but only after getting used to the baseline of the clones. Yes, that was my experience with Cody, Obi-Wan said after a moment, wincing as Cody's voice started to rise and his words became audible from their position. He did not sound happy at all. He blended into the background, but his familiarity with me and mine with him allowed for me to see what he was so skillfully hiding. The conclusion that draws is not a happy one, Shak said after a moment, her mouth drawn tight and brow wrinkled. No, it is not. You're supposed to be his brothers. Cody's shout shot the room into stillness. The cadets that were still practicing maneuvers paused mid-motion, and the group standing in front of Cody were practically cowering. You watch his back and you protect him, not throw him to the wolves. Vod. Colt's voice cuts through Cody's anger in sharp rebuke. Enough. They're just cadets, Commander Cody. Cody visibly straightened, his face going carefully blank as he turned from the group of suitably cowed cadets to face Commander Colt. Yes, I guess they are. He turns back to the cadets. Thank you for your time. Carry on. With that, he executed a perfect right face, left foot twisting at the heel, and right foot snapping out on the toe, right hand in a loose fist, bucket tucked securely under his left arm. Then he marched crisply over to Obi-Wan and Shak-Ti. He came to a halt in front of them with military precision, standing at attention, feet at a 45-degree angle from each other, and joined at the heels, right hand at his side along the seam of his greaves and eyes, straight ahead. Behind him, Colt winced. "Generals." "Commander," Obi-Wan acknowledged with a nod, having long since resigned himself to the realities of military drill and ceremony. "At ease." Cody moved, putting his right arm behind his back, stepping out with his right foot to widen his stance to shoulder width. "What did you find out?" "Not much, sir. Apologies." Cody began his report in clipped tones. Whatever he had learned had clearly upset him. His Force presence was agitated, lashing out at Obi-Wan under the cover of the shielding the Jedi Master had created around the two of them earlier. The cadets didn't know CT-9212 that well. They admitted to bullying him, General. "Bullying?" Obi-Wan repeated incredulously. "I wasn't aware that happened very often. Did they say why?" Cody's expression went even more blank and his stance even more stiff. It doesn't. They said it was because he had caused them to fail the last 3 group evaluations for their phase, sir. They were trying to get him to quit to save the rest of the squad." "I would not have allowed that to happen," Shakti said, expression dark. "I do not let them fail squads as easily as they did before." "The older batches know that, General," Cody said after a moment. He was so still that Obi-Wan's own muscles were crying out in sympathy. "But the younger ones don't really understand yet. They were trying to protect themselves." "At ease, Cody," Obi-Wan said again, taking care to make sure both his tone and his Force presence were gentle. Cody's muscles uncoiled a fraction but were still hopelessly stuck at parade rest. Obi-Wan shook his head. "What they did isn't your fault." "I know, sir." The acknowledgement rang entirely false. He was clearly drawing some sort of parallel to his own experience, but Obi-Wan did not know the details, and therefore could not completely understand. Regardless, they didn't have much by way of intel. They said he had a medical appointment today at 1100, and didn't show. "It's about 1300 now, sir. In another hour, a citywide alert will be issued for CT-9212 as per SOP. "So we have about an hour before the situation is entirely out of our hands," Obi-Wan said, crossing his arms and letting the fingers of his left hand dance along the edges of his beard. He sighed and locked eyes with Cody, hoping to convey both his optimism and a sense of absolution. "Well, we'd better get to it, Commander." "Yes, sir. Any suggestions on where to start? Were you able to get in contact with any of the 2/10 helping with the search, General?" "Everyone but Captain Helix. I gave out the cadet's CT number to Lieutenant Waxer and Sergeant Boyle, at least." "Let's start with Helix, sir," Cody said immediately. "He didn't answer. He must have found something." Obi-Wan hummed in acknowledgement, hand still absently stroking along his chin as he reached out to the Force. He suppressed a smile when he felt his commander instinctively doing the same, and instead followed along Cody's Force signature, trying to see through his eyes and replicate his train of thought. Helix, because he was too deep into something he was covering for, to give the game away by answering a comm call, because he might know the true reason for the medical appointment, because whatever horrible fate that was to befall CT-92112 would start there and end somewhere unpleasant. "Medical it is," Obi-Wan stated after a moment. Cody nodded, snapping back to attention, right heel meeting left with an audible clack of plastoid, and marched out of the training room, clearly expecting Masters Kenobi and T to fall in behind him. They scrambled to do so, throwing hasty goodbyes to poor Commander Colt, who was responsible for reining in the chaos they had caused. The trouble with CT-9212 had clearly struck deep in Commander Cody, who hadn't fallen so far into military protocol since before his first month or so under Obi-Wan's command of the 212th back when he had still been a captain under Alpha 17. They had managed to move past the rigidity of the Grand Army's military structure in recent months, but that truce was clearly entirely dependent upon Cody's comfort level. Obi-Wan ached to reassure the other man, but he didn't know what to say and knew that now was not the moment to do so. They followed through a series of incomprehensible hallways, passing squads of clones in various stages of training. All of them seemed to dart out of the way in deference to Cody, who stormed through the halls like he owned them. The commander's reputation preceded him, and his palpable bad mood quelled any lingering thoughts of interaction amongst the troopers in the halls. Even underneath all of that, Obi-Wan was able to see the respect, that spark of hero worship and awe, feeling it through the Force and letting it temper out the desperation they were starting to feel for CT-9212. They arrived a few short minutes later, the double doors to medical swooshing open automatically, and were greeted by a loud argument at the end of the medical bay. Helix and Nala Se were squared off, a computer terminal and an AZI model med droid between them. Helix had his bucket off, the gold-painted helmet resting on the empty cot next to him, the DNA strand design on the right side of it matching the one on the right side of his neck going up to his temple. Helix's face was set in a snarl and flushed, hands and arms gesturing wildly in the air, and his hair a damp, messy riot from being inside his helmet. A few curls that were normally slicked back over his scalp falling over his brow and onto the bridge of his nose. It made him look almost feral in the orderly infirmary. Nala Se was as angry as Obi-Wan had ever seen a Kamino. It was usually difficult to read their faces, as they did not move with their moods like humans. But Nala Se's face was a deeper blue, indicating blood rushing to the surface in a flush. Her arms were also up and hands moving faster than Obi-Wan had ever seen for one of her kind. Even her speech was coming quicker and with more inflection than Obi-Wan had thought she was capable of. He felt his eyebrows climb to his hairline in surprise, and noticed both Shakti and Cody mirror his reaction in the Force. For a moment, all three of them were stunned into silence. "Well, I think you're dead wrong," Helix snapped, left hand slicing through the air like a knife and gesturing towards the computer screen where a file was pulled up. "Look at this. There aren't any genetic markers of a defect. He's a perfect specimen. You tell me why you want to terminate perfectly good product." Well, that answered the question of whether or not Helix had found their cadet. Clearly he had, Obi-Wan thought ruefully. "Your conclusion like this clone is flawed," Nala Se snapped back without missing a beat. "He has failed 3 evaluations and was caught on camera staring blankly into space while being shot at. It is not a genetic defect, but a mental one. He is unfit." "He's not unfit, he's a child," Helix roared, slamming his left fist down so hard on the cot. His helmet jumped, the exam tray with instruments on it rattled, and the plastoid on his vambrace cracked. "It is not a child. It is a clone. Demogolka Hacha'an. He is a child, not an it. You disobey. Enough." "Ne Johaya." Cody's voice was like lightning, snapping out and forcing silence for the thunderclap that followed. Everyone stopped. No one moved. The 2 injured troopers on the side of the room opposite the argument were watching with comically wide eyes. Even the med droids doing treatments had stopped mid-motion. Obi-Wan would have been able to hear a feather fall in the resulting silence. He shook his head and blinked, realizing after a second that Cody had not only commanded the room with his voice, but had also lashed out with the Force to make them all still. Obi-Wan and Shakti shared a knowing look. Cody stalked over to Helix and Nala Se, his footsteps echoing like blaster shots in the silence. He came to a stop a few feet away, equidistant between both parties, and as he did so, the other inhabitants of the med bay cautiously went back to their tasks. Helix was the first of the combatants to respond, straightening up like he was coming to attention, but stopping right before doing so. He was still glaring daggers at Nala Se, but forced his attention away from the scientist and onto his commander. "Commander." Cody clipped his bucket to his utility belt and crossed his arms over his chest, looking from Helix to Nala Se and then back again. "What's going on here, Captain? Control your medic, CC-2224, Nala Se spat, interrupting them. "I was not aware such insubordination was allowed in the Grand Army of the Republic." "Oh, no," Obi-Wan muttered under his breath. He shared a concerned look with Shaq before the 2 of them hurried over and flanked Cody, Obi-Wan on Helix's side, and Shaq between the commander and Nala Se. "I'll run my unit how I see fit, ma'am," Cody snapped, his armor creaking as his arms flexed under it, blood suffused with adrenaline that came from defying the longnecks to their faces. "I'll thank you to stay out of it." "I agree," Obi-Wan said quickly when he saw Helix open his mouth to say something inflammatory. "And I support my medic, Dr. C." He cleared his throat, slipped his hands into his sleeves, and put on his best diplomat face. "Now, what seems to be the trouble?" "The trouble, sir," Helix started, speaking through a clenched jaw, "is that this scientist wants to kill one of our brothers." "I see," Master T answered serenely, and pushed that serenity out towards the room with the Force to try and calm tempers. She turned her attention to Nala C. "Dr. C, I was under the impression that the Jedi Council had forbid such an action. Was this not communicated to you?" "It was," Nala C bit out after a moment. Her anger gave way to indignation and insulted professional pride. "But you don't agree?" Obi-Wan picked up the conversation, eyes narrowed and expression contemplative. "No, I do not." She did not elaborate further, but Obi-Wan could guess her reasoning regardless. "It doesn't matter if you agree or don't," Cody said after a lull in the discussion, emboldened by General Kenobi's clear support. "You had orders that you disobeyed, and you have the nerve to come after my medic for holding you to those orders." Helix's expression went from angry to smug so fast, Obi-Wan almost missed the shift. The medic smirked triumphantly over at the scientist, clearly sensing that he had won this particular battle. Nala C inhaled sharply, and her anger returned like a flash fire. "I will not be cowed or questioned by a clone, even one so accomplished as you, CC 2224. She said imperiously, head wobbling back and forth in that superior way her people had, so she could look down her face at Cody. "His name is Cody," Obi-Wan snapped, losing his Jedi calm for just a moment, his protective nature winning out. Nala C scoffed, but did not otherwise respond. Obi-Wan chose to ignore her for now. "Regardless, Helix, which cadet was she attempting to decommission?" "CT-9212, General," Helix answered quickly. His mouth gave a sympathetic twist. "I don't think he even has a name yet, sir." "He doesn't," Obi-Wan replied with a small sigh. "We've been looking for him too. He was supposed to be here at 1100. He wasn't in training with his squad. Did you find anything by way of location?" "What do you want with a defective clone?" Nala C interrupted, her curiosity overcoming her anger. "Well, he's certainly not defective," was Obi-Wan's immediate rebuttal. "And what I want with him is not your concern. Rest assured, Lama Su will be hearing about your breach of protocol. We just came from a meeting with him where he promised that you were no longer decommissioning failed troopers." Nala C did not respond, nor did she look cowed. Obi-Wan chose to disregard her again and focus on his lead medic. "Helix, did you find any indication of where our wayward cadet could have gone?" Helix grimaced. "No, sir, I didn't. Perhaps Lieutenant Waxer or Sergeant Boyle have had better luck," Master T suggested, motioning towards Obi-Wan's comm unit. "I'll check," Cody said, taking over that task. He was still tense, and his Force presence was still very sharp, but it wasn't actively attempting to stab Obi-Wan any longer. He keyed up his comm and connected after a moment with Boyle. "Commander," Boyle exclaimed over the comm. "I was just about to call you, sir. I've got a lead on our missing cadet." "What have you got?" "Security camera spotted him making his way towards the loading docks. I think he's headed for Waxer's position, maybe trying to stow away on one of our LAATs." "How long ago was this?" Obi-Wan interrupted, stepping closer to Cody so that the microphone would pick up his voice. "Maybe about 20 minutes, General." Boyle huffed a laugh over the line. "He's a sneaky little bugger, sir. I watched him duck no less than 3 squads in the hallway, like he was decanted into it." "It was impressively, actually." Obi-Wan chuckled. He couldn't help the sense of pride he felt, even though the cadet was not even officially his student yet. "Yes, I imagine it was. Thank you, Boyle. Let Waxer know he's about to have company. Make your way out to the landing platform as well. We'll work in from the other direction and try to trap him between us." "Yes, sir." Boyle cut the connection, and Cody shared a quick look with Obi-Wan, silently confirming the plan. "So, pincer maneuver," Helix said as he snatched up his bucket and made to walk towards the door. "Sounds good to me, sir." "Indeed." Obi-Wan turned to Cody. "I assume we can do that from our current location in the city, Commander." "Yes, General," Cody said evenly. "We just need to go in the opposite direction we took to get here." "I think it would be best if you were to lead the charge, Commander," Master T said as they all strode quickly towards the exit. "You know this city better than the rest of us. Wait! Nala Se's voice snapped out, stopping them before Cody could respond. They all turned as one to face her as she continued. What do you plan to do with CT-9212? Take him with me, of course, Obi-Wan responded, like the answer was obvious. What else would I do? Nala Se looked like she'd swallowed a whole hive of bugs. I see. Thank you for your time, Doctor, Obi-Wan said with a slight incline of his head. It was a clear dismissal. This way, sir, Cody said, ushering them all out the door and out into the hall. Spilling out into the hallway, they followed after Commander Cody in what must have been the oddest procession to grace the halls of Tipoca City. Cody turned down different paths like he was following a bounty fob, every inch of him focused on finding their wayward cadet. Obi-Wan could feel the other man reaching out with the Force, stretching out his senses in a way that Cody had never displayed before. It felt like one Jedi reaching out for another, and Obi-Wan stifled a smirk, recognizing that as the technique he frequently used to find Anakin. Clearly, Cody was subconsciously picking up on everything Obi-Wan did on the battlefield, and after their discussion last night, actually felt comfortable enough to try it. You know where you're going, Commander? Helix asked, after they took 3 rapid turns, one after the other. Yes, Cody answered. He paused in the middle of a 3-way junction and stood, breathing slow and careful. His head cocked to the side, giving Obi-Wan a good view of the scar on the left side of his face. That way, I believe, Master T said, after a brief moment of meditation. She pointed to the right. I can sense him down that hall. Cody nodded. I agree, sir. Helix gave Cody a skeptical look, but followed after his commander without comment. The 212th's lead medic was starting to get suspicious, but he trusted Cody and Obi-Wan, so he did not protest. He knew whatever instinct Cody was following would lead them right where they needed to be. It always did, both on the battlefield and off it. Helix often used the commander to ferret out injured troopers after a battle, or the ones that were close to having an emotional meltdown that they did not know how to cope with. Somehow, Cody always seemed to know, and Helix had yet to witness him be wrong. He brought it up to Captain Rex at one point, but the blonde clone had just rolled his eyes and said that was just how Cody was, and that he had been like that forever. And, Helix noticed, the general seemed to be in on whatever was going on with Cody, which was good enough for him. Obi-Wan was unable to stifle the smile this time as he felt his commander and Master T confer with each other in the Force. For not having the first clue what he was doing, Cody was doing very well. Obi-Wan resolved in that moment to include him in some of the training exercises he would do with his new Padawan. Cody may not ever be a Jedi, but he could certainly learn the value of meditation and the basics of mental shielding to keep others from interfering with his mind. Considering that the 212th always seemed to find the Sith on the battlefield, such a thing was likely to be a necessity. A beep from his comm interrupted Obi-Wan's wandering thoughts, and he frowned down at it. They all stopped walking as he did, looking around at his companions. It's Waxer. Better answer it, General, Helix said with a shrug. Obi-Wan did. Waxer's stressed voice was loud in the empty hall. Sir, I spotted him. Get to landing pad A3, quick. Hey, no. You, there, stop that cadet. Yes, that one. Obi-Wan's brows jumped in surprise, sharing his incredulity with the others. Waxer, what's going on? He's slippery, sir. Waxer fairly growled down the line. He was out on the deck. I swear he almost walked right past me, bold as brass. I don't know how I didn't see him. Osprey and Cruz just tried to grab him, but he ducked back into the building. Sir, sorry. Obi-Wan sighed. Don't worry, Lieutenant. It's not your fault you didn't see him. I'm afraid that's a rather strong forced suggestion he used against you. Silence greeted that pronouncement. Come again, sir. A forced suggestion. Yes, this cadet is force-sensitive, Lieutenant. Criff me, Waxer breathed out, stunned. Right, sir. Should I tell the men that, or? I'd rather you didn't, unless absolutely necessary, Waxer. Obi-Wan replied, tone apologetic. I don't want to cause an even bigger panic than we already have. We can tell them all once we get back to the ship. We have a schedule to keep, after all. Yes, sir, Waxer replied, shock still colouring his voice. Well, now that I know, I think I have a better idea of how to pin him down like Boyle said you were planning. I'll get on it. Waxer out. The line cut out, and Obi-Wan looked over at Helix, whose presence in the Force was burning in eagerness. He huffed a short laugh. "Yes, Helix, you're serious?" Helix's tone was gleeful. "That's why we're here. Clones can have the Force like Natborns." "Of course you can, Helix," Obi-Wan said with a grin. He motioned down the hallway for them to continue. "Commander, if you would be so kind as to lead the way again." "You got it, General." They set off behind Cody, but Helix was unable to contain his questions. "What do you mean, of course, sir? The Prime wasn't Force-sensitive, so we shouldn't be." "The Force is not genetic," Obi-Wan replied. "The Force chooses its champions, and it has little to do with who your parents were. If it did, I fear there would be significantly less Jedi in the galaxy. We don't exactly reproduce in large numbers, after all. There are some who argue we should, and others that say it is not worth the risk." Shakti picked up the conversation. She gave Obi-Wan a knowing look. "I sense a different argument in you, Master Kenobi." "Which one?" Helix asked, completely consumed by his curiosity and leaving protocol behind. "Master Kenobi believes that we shouldn't have age restrictions on allowing new initiates into the temple," she answered, voice slightly teasing. "The rest of the Order and the Council do not agree." "Yes, well, I find it rather short-sighted, considering how Anakin turned out. Who's to say there are not more like him somewhere out in the Outer Rim? Do they not deserve the same chance? Can we justify gatekeeping knowledge of the Force in the way that we do? And further, with our numbers the way they are, can we really afford to turn anyone away?" "As fascinating as this discussion is," Cody interrupted from the front, voice terse, "we need to hurry, sirs. Something isn't right." Obi-Wan and Shakti both felt a spark of alarm in the Force, shared a concerned glance, then took off running behind Commander Cody, Helix bringing up the rear. Whatever Waxer had planned had certainly done something. The sound of pounding feet followed them down the hall, cadets, trainers and Kaminoans alike dodging out of their way as they charged forward. Careening around one last corner, they came to an open hangar that led to the spaceport dock. Cody skidded to a stop, everyone else following suit. The commander's eyes frantically scanned the crowd, not sure what he was looking for beyond something out of the ordinary. Obi-Wan calmed his breathing from the sprint and stepped up next to Cody, placing a gentle hand on the man's right bicep between the plastoid sections of his armor. "Breathe deep, Cody. Close your eyes." Cody did. "Now reach out with your feelings. He's somewhere in this room, you know where. Now find him, Commander." "Shab," Helix hissed out, watching the General and the Commander. "How'd I miss that?" "Now is not the time," Master T cautioned quietly. "Yes, sir," Helix agreed, shelving his shock and focusing on scanning the room himself. I think I can feel him, General," Cody said after a moment, eyes screwing up tighter, causing his scar to wrinkle. His head tilted a little to the left. He's scared. Hiding behind something, a crate. Wait, no, not a crate barrels, fuel barrels. Eyes still closed, he pointed down the left of the hangar towards several large racks of barrels. "That way." "Well done, Cody," Obi-Wan said, clapping his hand on Cody's right shoulder pauldron. "Let's go." Cody opened his eyes and looked around, the shock of what he had just done written on his face. Noticing that everyone was gawking at him, his expression went military blank, as did his presence in the Force. He carefully did not look at Helix as he set off across the hangar. Just as they started to follow, Boyle came running out of the opposite entrance. He spotted them and flagged them down, but Obi-Wan motioned for Boyle to follow them instead. As he did, Waxer spied them from his position out on the landing pad itself by his gunship. The lieutenant waved to them, but made no move to abandon his post, clearly deciding that guarding the ship was still required. Cody stopped them short of a collection of barrels set out on the floor, away from the racks. He looked to his general. "You want to go, or should I, sir?" "I think I will," Obi-Wan said, after a brief conference with the Force. It was urging him to go, nudging insistently. "All of you, wait here. I don't want to overwhelm him." With that, Obi-Wan walked the 10 or so meters over to where the cadet was hiding. He reached out with the Force himself, sensing the sheer terror coming off the poor child like speeder exhaust. Gently, he attempted to touch his Force presence to the cadets. He felt the child's shock, the sharp spike of panic that followed before it mellowed out into cautious curiosity. Amazingly, the child clumsily reached back, and Obi-Wan smiled. He darted around the barrels and slid into a crouch behind them, right next to a stunned CT-9212. "Hello there," Obi-Wan greeted softly. He kept his hands visible on his legs and attempted to keep his posture as open and non-threatening as possible. "What are you doing, hiding here all by yourself?" He took in the cadet's appearance, wondering over the plates of white plastoid, a style he had not seen on the troopers, but one that looked vaguely Mandalorian in design. The plastoid pieces were strapped down to the cadet in all the places Mandalorians typically wore their armor, over a set of trooper blacks that looked a size too big. A large chest plate and connected back plate, vambraces, pauldrons, thigh plates, and in lieu of shin guards, sturdy leather boots that went almost to the knee with buckles, and a knife sheath on the right boot. Next to the cadet on the opposite side was a regular trooper helmet. The boy's eyes were large and the same golden amber that Cody's were. His hair was strangely straight, not a curl in sight, and there was the beginnings of what Obi-Wan knew was a Padawan braid behind his right ear. CT-921T, stuttered out, still trying to work out what exactly was going on and how Obi-Wan had found him. He swallowed, trying to be brave. "I'm hiding from Nala C." "Yes, I know," Obi-Wan replied. "Not to worry, I have no intention of letting her anywhere near you, now or in the future." The cadet relaxed back against the barrels with a sigh. "Good. Not that I thought you would, but, well, still." He gave Obi-Wan a considering look, brows furrowed and lips pressed together in concentration. "I know you. I've seen you before in my dreams." "I imagine you have, yes," Obi-Wan said agreeably, sliding down to sit on the floor and lean against the barrels, outer robe fanning out underneath him. "I had a vision about you, too." "You did?" he exclaimed, eyes round in surprise. "I did. It's why I'm here. I've been looking for you, CT-9212. We were all quite concerned. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you worry, General. It's all right. You didn't know I was coming today, after all." Obi-Wan sighed, letting his head loll on the barrel and glancing over at the cadet. "Well, how about we step out and face the music? There's some people out there who would love to meet you." The cadet's eyes narrowed in suspicion as he probed out at Obi-Wan and the hangar with the Force. He was much more deliberate and precise with it than Cody, and it was jarring to Obi-Wan. They both seemed so similar, yet were also so very different. Cody's manipulation of the Force was mostly brute force, but the cadet's was delicate, like a surgeon's scalpel. Obi-Wan felt that control suddenly slip as the boy overreached and reacted, reeling him in like he had done for Anakin when he had been a Padawan. The cadet gasped, looking up at him with something akin to awe. "How'd you do that? How'd you stop it? Every time I reach for the power, I get stuck. But you just made it go back and let me go." "How?" Obi-Wan laughed. "I would be more than happy to teach you. That and so much more, if you'll agree to it." "Agree to it?" The cadet frowned at him, face screwed up in childish confusion. "Agree to what?" "Why, to be my Padawan learner, of course." Obi-Wan said cheerfully with a smile. "The Force, the power, it led me to you, so I could teach you. I have the Force?" The cadet's face held the same expression as Cody's last night in Obi-Wan quarters, shell-shocked that such a thing could be a reality and that it was okay. "No, I'm a clone. All the trainers and the longnecks say that we can't have the Force, that it's just for the Jedi." "Well, I am a Jedi," Obi-Wan replied after a moment. "And I know that anyone can have the Force if the Force chooses for them to." He locked eyes with CT-9212. "And it chose you. I can feel it. You're very strong, young one." "Whoa," he breezed out, jaw dropping. He closed his mouth with a clack and just sat there blinking. "You want to teach me to be a Jedi?" "Yes, I do." The cadet nodded, his right hand coming up to finger at the hair behind his ear. "I had a dream that you would ask me that." He smiled sheepishly, "and I grew out my hair because the power. The Force, it told me to. That I was supposed to." He dropped his hand, and his expression was as solemn as a child of 12 could make it. "I accept your offer, Master Jedi." Obi-Wan smiled. Good. Obi-Wan pushed to his feet and held out his hand for the cadet to take. The child looked at it for a long moment before taking a deep breath, grabbing a hold and pulling himself to his feet. In that moment, Obi-Wan felt the Force swirl around them, brushing across and over them like the wind, and like the crack of a blaster shot, the training bond between them snapped into place as if it had always been there. The cadet's thoughts skittered into Obi-Wan's mind, and he could feel the shock, the trepidation, but also the sheer relief that everything was going to be okay. Whipping around them in a whirl of joy, the Force radiated certainty. "This is right," it whispered. "It is as I wish it to be." "Whoa," CT-9212 whispered again. He scrubbed a hand over his face, then bent down to pick up his clearly oversized helmet and attempted to tuck it under his arm like the older troopers did. He couldn't quite manage it, and the result was comical. He glared at the bucket as it tried to slip from his grasp. "Ugh, cark it. Come on, this can't be that hard." Loud laughter rang out from behind them, causing Obi-Wan and the cadet to spin around to face the source. It was Helix, and with him were Boyle, Cody, and Master T. Helix was still chuckling, a wide grin on his face as he watched the cadet struggle with the helmet. "Looks a little big for you there, Vodika," he said after a moment. The cadet glared, indignant. He gave up wrestling the helmet with one hand and instead grabbed it with both. "It's not. It's fine. I got it." It was Cody's turn to smirk. He reached out and plucked the helmet from the cadet's grasp, ignoring the insulted squawk that followed. "Helix is right. This is way too big for you." He turned it over in his hands consideringly. "Where'd you get it anyway?" "The armory," the kid answered, puffing up in pride. He smirked. "No one even knew I was there." "You're very skilled," Master T said with an indulgent smile. "We heard of your exploits today on the landing pad from Lieutenant Waxer." "Very impressive. Where'd you get the rest of that old junk?" Boyle said, cutting into the conversation and gesturing to the get-up the cadet was wearing. "Haven't seen that old crap since the Alphas were tiny." "It was in the armory too," the cadet answered with a shrug. "In a banged-up bin covered in dust. I figured no one would miss it, and it would help me blend in." Obi-Wan gave the cadet's armor another appraising gaze. Perhaps his assumption of Mandalorian design was not so far-fetched as he first thought, especially since the current armor the troops wore was clearly inspired by Beskar gum. This armor seemed to be a direct copy, made out of plastoid. A prototype of some sort, clearly. "Yeah, you got that right," Boyle agreed with shrug. "We good now, General?" Commander Cody asked after a moment of careful consideration. "Yes, we are." CT-9212. Hang on, I'm sorry." He turned his attention to the cadet, expression apologetic. "Do you have a name? Calling you by a number just seems so crude." The cadet grinned. "The Force gave me a name and told me not to share it until I met you." Silence. Everyone shifted awkwardly, waiting, when the cadet did not continue. Boyle broke first. What is it?" "Oh!" the cadet exclaimed, sheepishly rubbing the back of his neck and blushing. Sorry. It's Kaz. My name is Kaz." Obi-Wan held out his hand for Kaz to shake. The cadet took it in a firm grip. "Nice to meet you, Kaz. I am Obi-Wan Kenobi, your new master. I promise to train you in the ways of the Force." "Well met, Master Obi-Wan," Kaz answered, shaking the hand once, then letting go. "I promise to be a diligent and mindful student of the Force." Master Shakti let out a fond yet exasperated sigh. "I suppose it would have been too much to ask to expect you to confer with the Council first on this matter, Obi-Wan." Obi-Wan turned to her and grinned, expression entirely unrepentant. "Yes, it would have been. Sometimes you are far too much like Qui-Gon Jinn for my tastes." She shook her head, but her expression was not one of reproach. She seemed almost proud of him. "Good luck, Obi-Wan. You will need it." "There's no such thing as luck," Cody blurted out, almost on autopilot. He winced and quickly recovered. "Just the Force, sir," Shakti laughed. "And how many times has that been said to you, Commander?" "Many," Boyle exclaimed, clapping a hand down on Cody's left pauldron. He turned his considering gaze onto Cody. "We ready to go, Commander?" The situation on Christophsis is pretty time-sensitive. Yes, indeed, Obi-Wan said, frowning. We better get going. Senator Organa doesn't have much time to spare. I will speak with Lama Su and Nala Se and smooth over Kaz's transfer to the 212th for you. Master T said as they departed. May the Force be with you, Obi-Wan, and also with you, Shach. Thank you. They shared a bow, then Obi-Wan turned and made for the last LAAT on the landing platform, the rest of them following behind him. Waxer was standing by the open bay doors, and the engines were running. He'd clearly been watching them from his vantage point. Cody, Boyle and Helix all put their helmets on, the armor seals snapping into place with a light hiss of air. Kaz gazed longingly at the helmet that Cody still held in his grip, but didn't reach for it. Obi-Wan hid a smirk behind his hand at the action, but didn't comment. As they got closer to the gunship, Waxer pushed off from his lean against the hull and straightened, coming to attention with a salute that Cody returned. All set, Lieutenant? Cody asked, coming to a stop. Yes, sir, Commander. The new squads have been transported up to the negotiator. They're just waiting on us and are ready to leave orbit as soon as we dock, Waxer replied. He gestured towards Kaz. I see you found him, General. I did, yes, Obi-Wan replied placidly, not giving anything away. He turned to his Padawan. Did they teach you the protocol for riding in the LAATs yet? Hang on tight to the hand loops and don't fall out, Kaz guessed with a wry expression. Waxer laughed. Close enough, Cadet. Get in, we have places to be. With that, they all clambered inside the gunship, which was empty save for them and Osprey in the pilot's seat. Obi-Wan reached up for the handhold and wrapped his other arm around Kaz's shoulders, hugging his new Padawan to him. He was too short to reach the handholds, and Obi-Wan was not about to allow him to be bounced around like luggage. Cody took up his customary spot next to Obi-Wan, setting the extra helmet down on the floor to free up his other hand. He dropped it on Kaz's shoulder, fingers curling around the top of the back plate of Kaz's armor in a sure grip. Boyle, Helix, and Waxer all shared a knowing look behind their faceplates, visible by the tilt of their heads. They were conspicuous by their silence. So, General, Waxer started as they took off, his voice deliberately innocent. Is he going to be our new commander? What? Boyle exclaimed, clearly the only one out of the loop. What do you mean, new commander? His helmet turned, the visor facing Cody. Did something happen to you, sir? Are you okay? Cody's sigh was a loud scratch of static from his vocoder. Nothing happened to me, Sergeant. I'm fine. He's not my replacement. No, I should think not, Obi-Wan said, eyes glinting in mischief. Considering he is officially assigned as my yeoman and my new Padawan. Obi-Wan couldn't see Boyle's face through the helmet, but he could feel the man's shock in the Force and knew his expression mirrored it perfectly. Your Padawan? Sir, does that mean? Yes, it does, Helix interrupted gleefully. He was still on Cloud 9 about the revelation that clones could have the Force. I'm going to be asking you so many questions about this, General. Prepare yourself, sir. Hang on. We're clones, Boyle protested. We can't. We can, Cody said, voice soft, but no less audible for it. Obi-Wan could feel his trepidation through the Force, and felt the familiar sensation of Cody's Force presence curling and spiking around him like it did when he was unsure. Despite all that, Obi-Wan felt Cody's determination as his commander made a decision. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this ship, understand? He paused, waiting for the chorus of affirmative noises to die down. I have it too. I knew it, Helix exclaimed. What, how? Boyle demanded. The commander is the one that found Kaz, Helix explained. The general walked him through it, and the commander found him with the Force. It was wild. He led us all through the city following the kid. Really? Kaz interrupted, looking up at the commander from his snuggled-up spot next to Obi-Wan. He closed his eyes, clearly focusing, and reached out with his feelings, poking out at the commander's Force presence, only to wince. Ow. Commander, you're sharp. Sorry, what? Cody replied, totally baffled. Obi-Wan could see his confusion, even through the helmet. Sir, what? It's all right. Obi-Wan verbally waved him off. He means your shielding you have. It's very rough, but effective, like a spiny shell surrounding you. If you like, I can teach you some more advanced techniques. In fact, I think I should, considering how much we tend to interact with Asajj Ventress. Yes, sir, if you don't mind. Of course not. I'll be teaching it to Kaz anyway, and you are welcome to learn with him. Can you have 2 Padawans? Helix asked, sounding skeptical. I'm not a Padawan. Cody shot that idea down immediately and with a vengeance. I'm not a Jedi. I don't want to be a Jedi. I'm a brother, a trooper, not a general. He paused, considering what he just said, and his next words were sheepish. No offense, sir. None taken, Obi-Wan said affably. I hadn't planned on teaching you to be a Jedi, Cody. You're right, you aren't one. But that doesn't preclude you learning to protect yourself. He turned his attention back to Kaz. As for you, we have a braid to start after we get the ship underway. Padawan braid, Kaz said hesitantly, unsure of his answer. The very same, Obi-Wan said, the hand that was wrapped around Kaz's shoulders shifting slightly so he could run his fingers through the tuft of hair behind his ear. You've gotten a good start on it already, Padawan. Kaz grinned. The Force said to. I'm sure, Obi-Wan answered with a smile, reaching up to ruffle the boy's hair like he used to do with Anakin. However, unlike Anakin, who would squirm away from Obi-Wan's touch, Kaz leaned into it and laughed. Like all of the troopers, Kaz seemed to enjoy physical touch and affection. Obi-Wan felt his heart clench and released the feeling into the Force, resolving to be more demonstrative than he normally would be. Oh, Force, he had forgotten about Anakin. Yes, he had told his former apprentice that he was requesting a Padawan, but Obi-Wan knew Anakin, and he knew that even though Anakin appeared to be fine with the concept in the hypothetical, he likely would not be so sanguine about it when it was directly in front of him. Anakin, for all his admirable qualities, tended towards jealousy and possessiveness. Obi-Wan was not looking forward to that conversation at all. However, he was bolstered by Cody's easy acceptance of Kaz, as evidenced by the iron grip his commander had on his new Padawan to keep him safe. Obi-Wan had the hilarious thought that he might have to fight his commander for his own apprentice, and stifled the laugh that thought created. Unable to shake the thought entirely, he reached out with the Force, feeling around Cody's now calm and decidedly not spiky Force presence, and was pleasantly surprised. It was barely there, but he could feel a connection between his commander and his new pupil in the Force. It was a small, tenuous thing, not like his own, more stable training bond with Kaz, but it was still there and would likely grow in strength as time went on. Carefully, Obi-Wan prodded around the edges of it, noting its solid anchoring in both parties, and was pleased and apprehensive. He hadn't planned on training Kaz in a vacuum, but he also hadn't planned on co-parenting either. However, it appeared the Force had other plans. Obi-Wan shook his head and jabbed out at the Force itself, churlishly. I know what I am doing, it replied almost laughingly. You will thank me for it later, little Jedi. Obi-Wan suppressed his sigh and resigned himself to his fate. It was a good thing he rather liked Cody, and that they were becoming good friends beyond their working relationship. Obi-Wan did not want to imagine being in this position if things had been different. Obi-Wan let his thoughts drift lazily for the remainder of the ride up to the ship.